sex abuse, corruption, mafia ties. The Vatican's secret world is far from whatever holy you think. What if we told you the truth is darker than you ever imagined? The Vatican, a city-state of less than half a square kilometer, yet the epicenter of one of the world's largest religions, and some of its darkest scandals. In 1982, a body is found hanging from London's Blackfriars Bridge, a banker, linked to the Vatican, with bricks in his pockets. It's not just a murder, it's a message, and it will mark the beginning of a reckoning decades in the making. Roberto Calvi, head of Banco Ambrosiano, and Michel Sindona, a Vatican-connected financier, weren't just banking executives. They were the church's gatekeepers to the underworld, laundering money for the Mafia, using the Vatican Bank to avoid scrutiny. Calvi was known as God's banker. When his bank collapsed under a $1.3 billion black hole, it exposed a tangled web of offshore accounts, shell companies, and silent Vatican approval. Sindona, convicted of fraud and later poisoned in prison. Vatican involvement was never fully admitted, but neither was it denied. At the center of it all, Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, head of the Vatican Bank. Wanted by Italian authorities, but never prosecuted, protected by the Vatican's sovereignty. The Church claimed innocence, but quietly it paid over $240 million in settlements. It was the price of silence and immunity. Then, the crisis shifted. From financial scandal to moral catastrophe. In 2002, the Boston Globe's Spotlight team uncovered a pattern of sexual abuse and systemic cover-up by the Catholic Church. One priest, over 130 victims, and a cardinal, Bernard Law, who protected him. What began in Boston rippled across the world. Ireland, Australia, Canada, Latin America. The abuse was global. The cover-ups coordinated. Dioceses declared bankruptcy. Schools closed. Donations plummeted. The faithful were betrayed. Pope Benedict XVI inherited a church in crisis. He met victims, he spoke of shame, and he began to clean house, especially within the Vatican Bank. But his own papacy would be rocked by a new scandal. In 2012, his personal butler leaked secret Vatican documents. They revealed infighting, corruption, and financial misdeeds inside the Holy See. Benedict, overwhelmed, isolated, and 85 years old, did the unthinkable. He resigned. In 2013, the cardinals elected Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Pope Francis, the first Jesuit pope, and the first from the Americas. He rejected luxury. He lived simply. He washed the feet of prisoners. And he went to work reforming the Vatican Bank, bringing in international auditors, enforcing financial reporting, and shutting down shady accounts. Under Francis, the Church's public image improved. Mass attendance rose. Donations increased. Even the once opaque Vatican Bank began publishing annual financial reports. But the scars remain. The Church is still reckoning with its past, and many say it hasn't gone far enough. In the global north, priest numbers decline, but in Africa and Asia, Catholicism grows. The center of faith is shifting. Today, nearly 1.4 billion people identify as Catholic. The Vatican, with all its secrecy, power, and contradictions, endures. It is run by men who believe they are shepherds of divine truth. But they are also men, fallible, fragile, and bound to the world they claim to transcend. As Pope Francis moved swiftly to bring transparency, not all challenges were solved by reform. Behind the Vatican's walls, critics remained skeptical, questioning whether the deep-rooted problems could truly be eradicated. While the Church's financial situation improved, the lingering question remained, Could its moral authority ever fully recover? The scars from the sexual abuse scandal, which had devastated lives, were not easily healed by administrative changes or financial reports. Many survivors were still demanding justice, while others questioned the sincerity of reforms. One area of particular scrutiny was the handling of the Vatican's wealth. Critics pointed out that the Catholic Church, with its vast global presence, held immense riches, properties, treasures, and an estimated wealth in the billions. Yet, how these assets were managed and whether they truly served the poor remained contentious. Pope Francis, known for his humility, consistently emphasized the need to divest from luxuries and reorient resources toward aiding the marginalized. But the battle between tradition and reform, between charity and wealth, would prove to be an ongoing struggle. Amid these moral and financial battles, the Vatican's global reputation was still under fire, especially as the financial world increasingly demanded compliance with international regulations. The Vatican Bank was often seen as a shadowy institution, opaque, unregulated, and, at times, involved in questionable transactions. In 2015, Pope Francis appointed a financial advisory board tasked with overseeing Vatican financial practices. This body's goal was clear: to ensure that the Vatican adhered to the highest standards of transparency and ethical governance. While the Church did take steps to align itself with international anti-money laundering regulations, the financial watchdogs in Europe and the U.S. remained cautious. The Vatican continued to be labeled as a potential haven for illicit financial activity, with its secretive operations still raising alarms. Despite these efforts, a persistent question lingered. Could the Vatican Bank, deeply entwined with its centuries-old traditions, ever truly embrace the transparency expected by the global financial community? Pope Francis, though, was not just working within the Vatican's walls. His progressive approach to church doctrine brought both admiration and controversy. In his early papacy, he made headlines for his open stance on issues such as divorce, homosexuality, and climate change. He consistently called for the Church to reach out to the poor, the marginalized, and those pushed to the edges of society, challenging the Church's centuries-old doctrines and practices. But his stance on LGBT rights, particularly, was a lightning rod. While he expressed compassion and understanding, many conservatives within the Church feared that his rhetoric signaled a shift away from traditional Catholic teachings. Could the Church reconcile its deep-rooted theological stances with the demands of modernity? His appeal to a wider audience, however, was undeniable. Pope Francis was now a global figure, not merely the leader of a religious institution, but an outspoken advocate for human rights, social justice, and environmental stewardship. His mission was clear: a church that didn't just preach, but acted in service to the most vulnerable. And as Pope Francis faced these internal struggles, the Catholic Church was also confronting a shifting global demographic. The days of European dominance were long gone. In the 20th century, the Catholic Church saw an unprecedented rise in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, regions where the faith was growing faster than ever before. But this shift presented its own set of challenges. The traditional clerical structure was ill-prepared for the needs of an increasingly diverse global congregation. How could the Church maintain its relevance in these emerging regions while remaining faithful to its doctrines? How could it address local concerns while preserving its universal message? At the same time, Europe and the United States saw a decline in priestly vocations and church attendance, with many faithful questioning their relationship with an institution so often embroiled in controversy. The global landscape of Catholicism was changing, and with it, the Vatican's role in shaping that future. Even with all these changes, one thing was clear: Pope Francis had made financial reform a cornerstone of his papacy. The Vatican Bank, once a symbol of opacity, began to open its doors. For the first time in modern history, detailed financial reports were made public, showing a clearer picture of the Vatican's financial health. The Church's real estate holdings, once shrouded in secrecy, came under scrutiny. The Vatican worked with international auditors to ensure that its investments were ethical, that funds were used responsibly.